Jewish feminism is a movement that seeks to make the religious, legal, and social status of Jewish women equal to that of Jewish men. Feminist movements, with varying approaches and successes, have opened up within all major branches of Judaism. In its modern form, the Jewish feminist movement can be traced to the early 1970s in the United States. According to Judith Plaskoff, the main grievances of early Jewish feminists were women's exclusion from the all-male prayer group or minyan, women's exemption from positive time-bound mitzvot, and women's inability to function as witnesses and to initiate divorce in Jewish religious courts. According to historian Paula Hyman, two articles published in the 1970s on the role of women in Judaism were particularly influential. The Unfreedom of Jewish Women, published in 1970 in The Jewish Spectator by its editor, True Device Rosmarine, which criticized the treatment of women in Jewish law, and an article by Rachel Adler, then an Orthodox Jew and currently a professor at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, called The Jew Who Wasn't There. Halachah and the Jewish Woman, published in 1971 in Davka, a countercultural magazine. Also, in 1973, the first American National Jewish Women's Conference was held in New York City. Blue Greenberg gave its opening address. Aguna. Aguna, literally, anchored or chained, is a halachic term for a Jewish woman who is chained to her marriage. The classic case of this is a man who has left on a journey and has not returned, or has gone into battle and is mere. It also refers to a woman whose husband refuses, or is unable, to grant her an official Jewish bill of divorce, known as a get. The problem of get refusal became more widespread when Jews lived in countries where civil divorce was available, separate from religious divorce. Outside Israel, an aguna could obtain a civil divorce and remarry via civil marriage, as non-Israeli legal systems generally do not recognize the aguna status, but an aguna would not typically pursue a second marriage, since her first marriage is still valid according to halakha. Therefore, any other sexual relationships would constitute adultery from her first husband. Furthermore, according to halakha, any children born by an aguna are considered mamzerim. The earliest prenuptial agreement for the prevention of get refusal was developed and accepted by the Rabbinical Council of Morocco on December 16, 1953. The prenuptial agreement gained further approbation in 1981 from Rabbi Shalom Messer's, chief rabbi of Jerusalem. Following Rabbi Messer's involvement, the Rabbinical Council of America actively pursued this issue, the latest in a series of RCA resolutions, that since there is a significant aguna problem in America and throughout the Jewish world, no rabbi should officiate at a wedding where a proper prenuptial agreement on get has not been executed, was passed on May 18, 2006. In 2012, the International Rabbinic Fellowship, an international organization of 150 modern Orthodox rabbis, passed a resolution saying that IRF rabbis may not officiate at a wedding unless the couple has signed a halachic prenuptial agreement. IRF rabbis are further encouraged to participate ritually only in weddings in which the couple has signed a halachic prenuptial agreement. Ritual participation includes but is not limited to reading the ketubah, serving as a witness, and making one of the Shiva Barachot. This makes the IRF the only Orthodox rabbinical organization in the world to require its members to use a halachic prenuptial agreement in any wedding at which they officiate. Beginning in the 1950s, some conservative rabbis have used the Lieberman Clause, named for Talmudist scholar and Jewish Theological Seminary professor Saul Lieberman, in the ketubah, requiring that a get be granted if a civil divorce is ever issued. Most Orthodox rabbis have rejected the Lieberman Clause, although leaders of the conservative movement claim that the original intent was to find a solution that could be used by Orthodox and conservative rabbis alike. and that leaders of Orthodox Judaism's Rabbinical Council of America, and respected Orthodox rabbis, including Joseph B. Soloveitchik, supposedly recognized the clause as valid. Later, because some civil courts viewed the enforcement of a religious document as a violation of the constitutional principle of the separation of church and state, conservative rabbis began to require couples to sign a separate letter, stating that the clause had been explained to them as part of premarital counseling, and that both parties understood and agreed to its conditions. Recognizing that this letter would constitute a separate civil document, enforceable in a civilian court. In 1968, by a unanimous vote of the Law Committee, it was decided that the joint Bet Din of the conservative movement could annul marriages as a last resort, based on the Talmudist principle of Hafkarat Kiddushin. According to Rabbi Meir Rabinovitz, the chairman of the joint Bet Din of the conservative movement, just the threat of this action was sometimes enough to compel the former husband to grant a get. In 1990, Aguna Day was established by ICAR, the International Coalition for Aguna Rights, to raise public awareness of the plight of the Aguna, and galvanize action to solve the problem. It is observed on the Jewish calendar date of the Fast of Esther. In 1995, the Israeli parliament gave the Rabbinical Court expanded legal power to sanction men who refuse to give their wives a get by suspending their driver's licenses, seizing their bank accounts, preventing travel abroad, and even imprisoning those who do not comply with an order to grant a divorce. However, women's groups say the 1995 law is not very effective because the court uses sanctions in less than 2% of cases. In 2004, Justice Menahem Hakowin of the Jerusalem Family Court offered new hope to Agonot when he ruled that a man refusing his wife a get must pay her NIS $425,000 in punitive damages, because a refusal to grant a get constitutes a severe infringement on her ability to lead a reasonable, normal life, and can be considered emotional abuse lasting several years. He noted that his is not another sanction against someone refusing to give a get, intended to speed up the process of granting a get, and this court is not involving itself in any future arrangements for the granting of a get, but rather, it is a direct response to the consequences that stem from not granting a get, and the right of the woman to receive punitive damages. This ruling stemmed from the public litigation project initiated by the advocacy organization Center for Women's Justice as one of a number of successful lawsuits filed in Israeli civil courts claiming financial damages against recalcitrant husbands. In 2014, the Rabbinate of Uruguay instituted the requirement for all Jewish couples that marry under its auspices to sign a rabbinic prenuptial agreement. The agreement states that in the case of the couple divorcing civilly, the husband is obligated to immediately deliver to his wife a get. The initiative was launched by Sarah Winkowski, a director of the Kehila, the Comunidad Israelita del Uruguay, who is also a vice president of the World Jewish Congress and longtime activist for the rights of women within Jewish law. In 2015, Zohar, along with the Israel Bar Association, introduced a prenuptial agreement meant to help ensure divorcing wives will receive a get. Under the agreement, the husband commits to paying a high sum of money daily to his spouse in the event of a separation. Israel and Jewish feminism. In 1947, David Ben-Gurion agreed that the authority in matters of marriage and divorce would be invested in the hands of the chief rabbinate of Israel, and an agreement was signed stating that, known as the status quo letter. In 1953, the Knesset enacted the Rabbinical Court's Jurisdiction Law, 5713-1953. Section 1 of the law states, matters of marriage and divorce of Jews in Israel, being citizens or residents of the state, shall be under the exclusive jurisdiction of the rabbinical courts. The substantive provision of Section 2 of this law further states Marriages and divorces of Jews shall be performed in Israel in accordance with Jewish religious law. However, a Muslim woman in Israel may petition for and receive a divorce through the Sharia courts without her husband's consent under certain conditions, and a marriage contract may provide for other circumstances in which she may obtain a divorce without her husband's consent. A Muslim man in Israel may divorce his wife without her consent and without petitioning the court. Christians in Israel may seek official separations or divorces, depending on the denomination, through ecclesiastical courts. In 2006, Israel's Supreme Court ruled that women should be allowed to deliver eulogies and that the burial societies, or Shevra Kadisha, should not impose gender segregation in the cemetery. The ruling was in response to an incident in Petach Tikva in which a woman was stopped from eulogizing her father. However, the court's ruling was not backed up by the Religious Services Ministry until 2012, when Israel's chief rabbinical council ruled that women can deliver eulogies at funerals, but that it is up to the community rabbi to decide on a case-by-case basis. In 2010, Israel passed the civil union law, allowing a couple to marry civilly in Israel if they are both registered as officially not belonging to any religion. On September 28, 2010, the Israeli Supreme Court outlawed public gender segregation in Jerusalem's Meah Shearim neighborhood in response to a petition submitted after extremist Haredi men physically and verbally assaulted women for walking on a designated men's-only road. However, in January 2011, a ruling of the Israeli High Court of Justice allowed the continuation of the gender segregation in public buses on a strictly voluntary basis for a one-year experimental period. In 2013, the Israeli Orthodox rabbinical organization Beit Hillel issued a halashik ruling which allows women, for the first time, to say the Kaddish prayer in memory of their deceased parents. Also in 2013, the minimum marriage age in Israel became 18 for females and males. Also in 2013, the religious judges law in Israel was amended to say that at least 4 women must be included in the religious judges nomination committee, including a female advocate in the religious courts, and that the total number of committee members shall be 11. Also in 2013, Israel's chief rabbinate promised to remove the obstacles preventing women from working as supervisors in the state kosher certification system, and Emunah announced the first supervisor certification course for women in Israel. Also in 2013, the Minister of Religious Affairs and Chief Rabbis issued statements telling ritual bath attendants only to inspect women who want inspection, putting an end to forced inspections of women at mikvahs. In May 2013, after Women of the Wall, led by Anat Hoffman, had engaged in civil disobedience to exercise freedom of religion, a judge ruled that a 2003 Israeli Supreme Court ruling prohibiting women from carrying a Torah or wearing prayer shawls at the Western Wall had been misinterpreted and that Women of the Wall prayer gatherings at the Western Wall should not be deemed illegal. In October 2014, Women of the Wall smuggled in a Torah scroll to the Western Wall women's section and held their first Torah reading by a woman at the site, which was part of the bat mitzvah of Sashalut. However, Shmuel Rabinovitz, the rabbi of the Western Wall, issued a statement saying in part, "In future, efforts will be made to ensure that this does not happen again, and the introduction of Torah scrolls will be banned for everyone, men and women." In December 2014, some of the Women of the Wall became the first women to light menorahs at the Western Wall. Specifically, they lit 28 menorahs in the women's section of the wall. Sarah Silverman was among those who attended the lighting of the menorahs. However, this event came after the rabbi in charge of the Western Wall had refused a request from Women of the Wall to place a menorah in the women's section. In 2015, the first Israeli political party dedicated to ultra-Orthodox women was unveiled, called Bijutan. Haredi Women Making Change. Also in 2015, T. Zohar, along with the Israeli Bar Association, introduced a prenuptial agreement meant to help ensure divorcing wives will receive a get. Under the agreement, the husband commits to paying a high sum of money daily to his spouse in the event of a separation. Jewish feminist theology. Various versions of feminist theology exist within the Jewish community. Some of these theologies promote the idea that it is important to have a feminine characterization of God within the Siddur and service. In 1976, Rita Gross published the article, Female God Language in a Jewish Context, which Jewish scholar and feminist Judith Plaskoff considers probably the first article to deal theoretically with the issue of female God language in a Jewish context. Gross was Jewish herself at this time. Reconstructionist Rabbi Rebecca Valpert comments, the experience of praying with Siddur Nashim, the first Sabbath prayer book to refer to God using female pronouns and imagery, transformed my relationship with God. For the first time, I understood what it meant to be made in God's image. To think of God as a woman like myself, to see her as both powerful and nurturing, to see her imaged with a woman's body, with womb, with breasts. This was an experience of ultimate significance. Was this the relationship that men have had with God for all these millennia? How wonderful to gain access to those feelings and perceptions. Siddur Nashim was self-published in 1976 by Naomi Janovitz and Margaret Wenig. In 1990, Rabbi Margaret Wenig wrote the sermon, God is a Woman and She is Growing Older, which as of 2011 has been published 10 times and preached by rabbis from Australia to California. Rabbi Paula Ramers comments, those who want to use God, she language want to affirm womanhood and the feminine aspect of the deity. They do this by emphasizing that which most clearly distinguishes the female experience from the male. A male or female deity can create through speech or through action, but the metaphor for creation which is uniquely feminine is birth. Once God is called female, then the metaphor of birth and the identification of the deity with nature and its processes become inevitable. Ahuva Zakar affirms that using both masculine and feminine language for God can be a positive thing, but reminds her Reformed Jewish readership that God is beyond gender. Feminine imagery of God does not in any way threaten Judaism. On the contrary, it enhances the Jewish understanding of God, which should not be limited to masculine metaphors. All language that humans use to describe God is only a metaphor. Using masculine and feminine metaphors for God is one way to remind ourselves that gendered descriptions of God are just metaphors. God is beyond gender. These views are highly controversial even within liberal Jewish movements. Orthodox Jews and many conservative Jews hold that it is wrong to use English female pronouns for God, viewing such usage as an intrusion of modern feminist ideology into Jewish tradition. Liberal prayer books tend increasingly to also avoid male-specific words and pronouns, seeking that all references to God in translations be made in gender-neutral language. For example, the UK liberal movement Siddur Lev Chadash does so, as does the UK Reform movement's Forms of Prayer. In Mishkan Tefillah, the American Reform Jewish prayer book released in 2007, references to God as He have been removed, and whenever Jewish patriarchs are named, so also are the matriarchs. In 2015, the Reform Jewish High Holy Days prayer book Mishkan HaNefesh was released. It is intended as a companion to Mishkan Tefillah. It includes a version of the High Holy Days prayer Avinu Malkeinu that refers to God as both loving Father and compassionate Mother. Other notable changes are replacing a line from the Reform movement's earlier prayer book, Gates of Repentance, that mentioned the joy of the bride and groom specifically, with the line, rejoicing with couples under the chuppah, wedding canopy, and adding a third, non-gendered option to the way worshippers are called to the Torah, offering, Mibiat, Hebrew for, from the house of, in addition to the traditional, son of, or daughter of. In 2003, the female face of God in Auschwitz, A Jewish Feminist Theology of the Holocaust, the first full-length feminist theology of the Holocaust, written by Melissa Raphael, was published. Judith Plasko's Standing Again at Sinai, Judaism from a Feminist Perspective, and Rachel Adler's Engendering Judaism, An Inclusive Theology and Ethics are the only two full-length Jewish feminist works to focus entirely on theology in general. Thus, Standing Again at Sinai, Judaism from a Feminist Perspective is the first book of Jewish feminist theology ever written.